Hi, my name's Chris Smith from Storytelling Schools, and today I'm going to tell you a story called Snip Snip, which is a story about what happens when we lose things that we love. Lovely little story, I love it, and it's my present for you for today. It goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a boy called Jack. And Jack, he loved his mum and he loved his dad, but most of all, he loved his granddad. His granddad was a tailor, meaning a man who made clothes by cutting out cloth and sewing it back together. And when Jack was 5 years old on his birthday, he went round to his granddad's house and says, "Granddad, have you got me a present? It's my birthday today." And his granddad says, "Sure, Jack, over there in the box." And Jack goes over to the box and picks up out of it a beautiful coat. He puts it on, he does up the buttons, he says, "Thanks very much, Granddad, that's a fantastic coat. Thank you, bye." And on the way home, his friends say, "Look, Jack, how are you? We love that coat." And Jack says, "I know, my granddad made it for me. He's good, isn't it?" And another one says, "Jack, cool coat. Oh, I want one like that." "Oh, well, you can ask my granddad. He made that for me." Good, isn't it? And Jack loved that coat so much, he wouldn't take it off. He wore it at home, he wore it at school, he wore it down the park. He even wore it in bed, on top of his pyjamas. In fact, he couldn't get to sleep without the feeling of that coat against his cheek. Nothing wrong with that. But then time passed, and Jack grew bigger, and the coat didn't. And it started to split, and it started to fray, and it started to smell. And Jack's mum comes to him and says, "Jack, let's chuck away that dirty old coat and get you a new one." Jack said, "No, Mum, I love that coat. I don't want to lose it. Jack, I'll go round and talk to Granddad. He'll know what to do." So Jack goes round to his granddad's shop and says, "Granddad, Mum says I have to throw away the coat because it's smelly and split and frayed, but I love it. What shall we do?" And his granddad says, "Give me the coat. I know what to do." So Jack takes it off, gives it to his granddad, and his granddad gets out a pair of scissors and he starts to snip and he starts to sew. And as he snips and sews, this is what he sings. "Snip, snip, snip, this is what I do. Snipping here, snipping there, making something new. In and out and in, this is how I sew. Sewing things together, that's what I know." And he snips and sews and sews and snips until he's cut up the coat and sewn it back together again as a jacket. Jack puts on the jacket. "Great jacket, Granddad, thank you." He loves that jacket so much. In the street, his friends say, "Oh, Jack, where'd you get that?" "My granddad made it for me. It's good, isn't it?" "Yeah," they say, "Lucky you. We love your jacket." And Jack loved it too. He wore it at home, he wore it at school, he wore it down the park, he wore it on holiday, he wore it everywhere. He even wore it on top of his pyjamas when he went to bed. And then time passed. You know what happened. The coat didn't get bigger. Even the jacket didn't get bigger, but Jack did. And the jacket started to fray and split and smell. And his mother says one day, "Jack, let's chuck away the jacket and get you a new one." "No," said Jack, "I love my jacket. Granddad'll know what to do." So he goes round to his granddad's shop and says, "Granddad, Mum wants me to throw away the jacket, but I love it. I don't want to throw it away. Help." "Okay," says his granddad, "give it here." So Jack takes it off, and his granddad snips and sews and sings like this. Sing with me. "Snip, snip, snip, this is what I do. Snipping here, snipping there, making something new. In and out and in, this is how I sew. Sewing things together, that's what I know." And he snipped and sewed and sewed and snipped and handed back to Jack a lovely little t-shirt. Jack likes it. He says, "Oh, thanks very much, Granddad. Love that t-shirt." He puts it on, he feels good. In the streets, they love it. He wears it everywhere, at home and school, down the park, on holiday, everywhere. But then one day, his mum says, "Jack, the t-shirt doesn't fit. It's smelly and it's split and it's got holes. Let's chuck it away and go down the shops to get you a nice, clean, new one." "No," said Jack, "I love it. It's my favourite thing. I don't want to lose it. I'm going to talk to Granddad." So he goes round to his granddad's shop, gives him the t-shirt, and his granddad snips and sews and sews and snips and sings the song. "Snip, snip, snip, this is what I do. Snipping here, snipping there, making something new. In and out and in, this is how I sew. Sewing things together, that's what I know. And he snips and sews and sews and snips and hands back to Jack a lovely little button. Jack loves the button. He wears it everywhere. His friends love it. Everybody loves it. But one day he's just been playing football and he looks down and the button has gone. He can't find it on the pitch. He can't find it on the road. He's lost it. He says, "Mum, I've lost my button." She says, "So what? Forget about it." "No," says Jack, "I love it. It's my favourite thing. I'm going to Grandad." And he says to Grandad, "Grandad, I've lost the button. It was my favourite thing. What shall we do?" And his granddad says, "How old are you, Jack?" And Jack says, "I'm 10 and a half. "Right," he says, "I think you're old enough for this." And he gets a bit of paper and a pen from the shelf and he writes like this. And then he hands the bit of paper to Jack, and Jack read it. And he says, "Grandad, wow, this is our story. It's about the coat and the jacket and the t-shirt and the button and you and me." "Yeah," says his granddad, "that's right. Well, why have you given it to me? I want the button." "Well," he says, "the thing is, Jack, nothing in life lasts forever. And you're old enough to know that now. Nothing. Not coats, not jackets, not even me. Nothing. But if you love something and you lose it, if you put it in a story, then every time you tell the story, you'll remember the thing that you lost and maybe you'll feel better. Try it." Jack says, "Okay, thank you, I'll try it." So on the way home, he says to his friend, "You want to hear a story?" "Okay," they say. And Jack tells this story about the coat and the jacket and the t-shirt and the button and the story. And they loved it. And they said, "God, that was a great story." "I know," said Jack. "My granddad made it for me. He's a tailor." And he told it, and every time he told it, he saw the thing that he loved and he felt better. And then, time passed and he'd had enough and he stopped. But by that time, he told so many people and they told their friends and they told their friends. And then one day, one of their friends told it to me. And now I'm telling it to you. So now you're part of the story. And you can tell it to somebody maybe and help them learn that nothing in life lasts forever. But if you love something and you lose it, put it in a story, and then every time you tell the story, you can remember the thing that you loved. And maybe for some of us, you'll feel better when you do that. Give it a try. You never know. It might help. And that is the end of that. So that's the delightful Snip Snip story. Here's 7 things you might want to do with it. Where are we? So first of all, learn to tell it. So you can tell it with our method for learning stories. Hear it from me, map it, do a little story map. And here's our story map for Snip Snip. Starting with love, Grandad and Jack. He loves his granddad a load. He makes him a coat, he makes him a jacket, he makes him a t-shirt, he makes him a button. Loves the button, makes him a story, remembering that if you love something and you lose it, putting it a story, and you'll be able to remember the thing that you loved in your imagination. So it's about remembering. That's the simplest story map. You could make it more complicated, but me, I like to keep it simple. It's the main steps to remember. And then we can step the story once you've done your map. So that would be, again, it could be simple as love. Next step, coat. Next step, jacket. Next step, t-shirt. Next step, button. Next step, lost. Next step, story. Next step, remember. Something like that. So you've got the gestures to help you remember the story. And after that, when you can map it and step it, you can tell it. So that's the first thing usually we do. And then talk about it. This is a great story to talk about. Ways to talk about loss and things that we miss and things. And what we do about that. It's full of juicy memory that people can be free to talk about once they've heard the story. Nice little exercise. You can make clothes. Maybe you've got paper and glue and scissors. You can pretend that you're the tailor and you can make all sorts of clothes and cut them out and make them into something else. Take pictures, make an exhibition, play around with that. Here's something you might or might not want to do. For some children, this is a really valuable thing to add to the story. For others, you might think not so. So one way of extending the story is to say, you know what happened later? Something really sad. Jack's granddad died, and Jack, he was really heartbroken. And then he remembered what his granddad said. If you love something and you lose it, put it in a story. Maybe it'll help. And so he started telling the story again to remember his granddad. And at his granddad's funeral, he told this story to everybody, and they loved it. So you could do that. You could role play the funeral of the granddad and have Jack telling the story and talking about his granddad. You could have an obituary for the granddad, writing down about the lovely old guy and all the things that you know about him, what he was like and what he did in life. Keep it light. You can make a poster for the tailor shop and connect with all of that stuff about making and snipping and creating clothing. And of course, last but not least, you could write the story. So those 7 things you can do with Snip Snip. There's loads more where that came from, and I'm sure you can think of a bunch yourself. So for now, that's all for me, and that is the delightful Snip Snip, my present to you for today.